Hello and welcome to our CCTE conference presentation entitled Got Resiliency, English Language Learners' Perspectives in Online Learning Amidst Systemic Racism. We are so grateful and excited to be here with you. My name is Kimmie Tang and I am representing Cal Lutheran University and Cal State University of Dominguez Hills.
And my name is Nirmla Flores with the University of Redlands. During this presentation, we will discuss key findings and potential implications, drawing on a literature review and our preliminary data of English language learners and educators. We will also provide potential strategies of how instructors can further support and build resiliency among online English language learners amidst systemic racism and challenges.
So before we get started, we're going to ask you to take a quick self-assessment of your resiliency level, which we adopted from Nicholson, the McBride Resilience Questionnaire. So please listen to the 3 steps. First, please pause this slide for about 30 seconds to complete this self-assessment by choosing a number between 1 and 5 that best represents your answer for each of these specific statements. And please note that 1 represents strongly disagree and 5 represents strongly agree to the statement. Please be sure to keep track of your score for each of these statements because you're going to add them all up at the end. So once you've added them all up, please unpause and the slide will continue.
Okay, were you able to pause and complete the self-assessment and add up the score? This chart provides a general description of where you might be placed in terms of your resiliency level. At the developing level, you recognize the benefits from moving forward and being determined. At the established level, you may occasionally have tough days, but you rarely feel ready to give up, so you persist. At the strong level, you have a knack for turning setbacks into opportunities. At the exceptional level, you tend to bounce back when life or circumstances push you down. It is important, though, to understand that you could be at different levels of resiliency depending on the situations, and no one is ever at the exceptional level at all times. Just like this virtual conference and teaching online, we were all put in a position where your resiliency is being tested. For some of you, this whole experience is very frustrating. Therefore, your resilience level may be at a developing, while some of you are not so much, putting you at either the establishing level of resilience or even at the strong to exceptional level. Some of you had to relearn how to teach online, like new instructional strategies and so much more. While at the same time, you learn how to speak computer language. Regardless, our resilience level is constantly being tested and never linear.
Racism is a type of oppression based on belief that one race or group is superior to another. So much of racism, especially in the current moment, is systemic, embedded into the structure that surrounds us. To this day, systemic racism adversely affects everyone in our society, whether people who belong to the dominant group or marginalized groups. And in our educational system, racial segregation, disproportionate funding, unequal opportunities to learn, and gaps in achievements continue to exist. Now, many of us who are disadvantaged by these inequities are low incomes, minorities, and oftentimes English language learners. So as a consequence for its English language learners, the impact may be compounded given by the intersectionality of race and language, leaving them further marginalized in our educational system. To combat these challenges for English language learners, they must be more resilient. So resiliency, as defined by Oxford Dictionary, is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Given the current COVID-19 context and the ongoing systemic racism, students, parents, and educators find themselves being challenged. For example, we have all been compelled to quickly learn and adapt to online learning and thus navigate through the multiple challenges of connectivity, access to the right equipment, and speak a new computer language. Now, this particular adaptation process can be significantly more challenging for English language learners at every level of education, as early as pre-K to higher education, especially since there are so many factors affecting students' self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-regulations and autonomy. Now, some researchers do argue that resiliency can be affected by the environment in order to cope and adapt to change. Yet, still others contend that resiliency can be further influenced by cultural and institutional societal factors such as systemic racism or discrimination. Now, although researchers agree that the influences affecting resiliency are complex, there remains a lack of research on resiliency as it relates to online learning among English language learners.
For the purpose of this study, we build upon current resiliency framework to examine those complex factors that may affect the resiliency of university English language learners who are engaged in online learning. Specifically, we propose the following research questions listed on our slide. Please take a moment to read them. Based on convenience sampling, we surveyed university students who were engaged in online learning from 5 different undergraduate and graduate classes. Data collected were then disaggregated, analyzed, and compiled to develop several key themes.
Out of 52 participants, we only captured the data from 24 individuals who self-identified as English language learners. Hence, we will share our findings as it relates to English language learners from here on. So when we compare to their non-ELL counterparts, overall English language learner participants deem themselves as exceptional in terms of their level of resiliency, scoring slightly higher than their non-ELLs. This means that the English language learners are very resilient most of the time, and they frequently bounce back whatever life throws at them. They essentially believe in making things work. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, we wanted to highlight 4 components of the resiliency, which include greater confidence, stronger self-esteem, higher self-concept, and exceptional self-efficacy. Now, based on our findings, both groups scored low in the area of self-esteem and high in the area of self-efficacy. However, English language learners scored higher in the area of self-concept. It's really not surprising because English language learners often have to have greater resiliency to succeed and higher capacity to believe in their own ability to perform, mainly because no one else will.
Based on our survey, most participants deem themselves as advanced in their computer knowledge and skills. However, the result is based on their familiarity of the platform they've been using in the past several years. Participants also explain that if a new platform is introduced, they feel like they have to learn a new language again. Therefore, by having to learn a new computer language every time a new platform is introduced, the struggle for English language learners seemed to be recursive. In essence, the participants felt that their level of resiliency is being tested. So as you can see in this graph, it shows how English language learners perceive themselves as computer literate. Interestingly enough, 38% of them see themselves advanced when asked about their level. In comparison, only 28% of non-English language learners perceive themselves as advanced in computer knowledge.
English language learners also face significant challenges in navigating and adapting to online learning due to language barriers, lack of technology access, and inequitable distributions of resources. Now, majority of our identified English language learners perceive themselves as having a strong or exceptional level of resiliency, despite the challenges of online learning. Participants stated that the more access they have to equipment, computer software, technology supports, and online resources, the more successful they are in adapting to online learning challenges. In addition, they felt that the more they gain from computer skills and knowledge, the more they are able to persevere in online learning. However, participants expressed their overall challenges in comprehending basic computer language despite being delivered in an English language. Some example computer jargons include platform, synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid, Google Suite, and others. Now, as you can see, there is a plethora of challenges that makes it difficult for English language learners to be successful in their online learning. Therefore, these challenges are testing their levels of resiliency. But because these challenges are not new to them, they are learning to navigate the online system just as they would in a traditional classroom setting. The only difference between online learning and traditional setting is the set of terminologies used for some of the computer platform.
Although majority of the respondents felt that systemic racism still prevails in our society, they perceive that little can be done about it, and as a result, their level of resiliency may be compromised. Students reported that systemic racism constantly challenges their resiliency level, regardless of whether the educational platform is being delivered online or in a more traditional setting. However, there are five main areas in which their level of resiliency are tested more in an online platform. The first one is no in-depth one-on-one guidance, no translation in the primary language. There's lack of multiple modalities of instructional delivery, and there's also lack of opportunity to demonstrate knowledge. And the last one is cultural and linguistic dispositions. As a result of being challenged, they feel that they are more invisible during an online learning. And so this perpetuates the ongoing systemic racism even in the online world. So we would like you to take part in a reflective activity. Please pause for a few seconds to reflect on the experiences you may have had in seeing the impact of systemic racism on English language learners' resiliency in an online learning. Now, when you're finished, please unpause to move on to the next slide.
In light of the pandemic and racially driven tragedies, educators are compelled to find solutions to empower their students and strengthen their own resiliency. Now, one way to prepare future educators is through the teaching of self-awareness of their preconceived biases, microaggressions, and expectations in order to recognize and break down barriers of systemic racism in education. Now, another potential approach is to equip them with knowledge and skills on how to respond and instruct in an equitable and inclusive environment, addressing the needs of the culturally and linguistically diverse student population. Some ways to empower students could include, but not necessarily limited to, teaching self-advocacy skills where they can voice their concerns and stand up for their rights. Another potential way is to teach students how to build a positive mindset and attitudes where they could visualize success and boost their self-esteem. Lastly, we can assist students on how to adapt to adversarial challenges by teaching them the skills to deal with conflict. We'd love for you to take an active participation here by pausing for a moment and reflecting on the following questions. How do your teaching practices influence English language learners' resiliency? And what can you do to empower and build students' resiliency?
Here are some ways to support resiliency in online learning. The first one is to provide authentic evidence of academic success, which is also a concept of competence, such as engaging in a research project relevant in their own lives. The second one is to show that they are valued members of the community, which is also a belonging concept, by validating in terms of their strengths, interests, and background. The third is to reinforce idea that they can contribute to the community, which is the concept of usefulness, through community participation. And the last one, we want to make them feel empowered, which is the concept of potency, in which student choices and self-advocacy are evident. The participants provided insights on how educators can better support and build resiliency during online learning. Interestingly enough, some of the strategies and techniques identified by the participants for online learning were already supported by research studies for traditional classroom face-to-face learning for English language learners. I want you to all pause for a moment and respond to this question. What are some of the potential strategies you can do to foster English language learners' resiliency towards online learning?
Now, we would like to share briefly some strategies to embrace equitable education. As you already know, one way is to increase restorative practices by providing a framework to build community and respond to the challenges through authentic dialogue. Another approach is through the organizational and instructional practices. Specifically, this approach challenges the teachers to learn more about the student's learning style and proactively implement instructions that strengthen students' skill sets. Supporting this approach, the mastery expectations help build personalized, self-paced learning for students, whereas the focus of the cooperative learning enhances group interaction and dynamic learning. Now, although these two are different, they are yet complementary instructional programs that are essential to building student-led parent conferences where students are in charge of advocating for their own learning. Although these strategies exist in our school systems, we as educators need to consistently recognize, embrace, and implement these strategies and practices to create a more equitable and inclusive education.
Now that we have provided various strategies and given you the opportunity to participate in reflective activities, we would like to briefly discuss the implications of our study. Here are a few implications. First, we need to further examine more evidence-based strategies for online English language learners. Then we should explore the extent to which systemic racism hinders the development of resiliency among online English language learners. Lastly, we should investigate the development of effective strategies to enhance restorative as well as organizational and instructional practices. So to conclude, it is important to understand why some children do well despite adverse early experiences, because it can inform more effective policies and programs that help more children reach their fullest potential and become resilient. We would like to end with this quote from Robert Kennedy, and please take a moment to read them.
Here is our contact information. For the next two slides, they are our references, so please take a look at those. Thank you so much for taking the time in participating in our presentation. We really hope that you gained some insights on how to build resiliency among English language learners.